Hi, I'm Shannon Torrance, and this is Magic is Real. Today, my interview is with Mia Simone. Mia is a gifted intuitive reader, and she's a coach who helps other people develop and evolve their own intuitive abilities. Mia has a passion for studying the science of energy, and in this interview, she shares with us some of her findings and her insights that have developed as a result of this research. If you enjoy this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you so much, and here's my conversation with Mia Simone. Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Torrance, and this is Magic is Real. Today, my guest is Mia Simone. Mia is an intuitive reader. She's also an intuitive coach. She helps other people develop their intuitive skills, abilities. And I know Mia because for my birthday, I wanted to get myself an intuitive reading. And I looked on Yelp, which is where you go. And I know from Yelp reviews that people don't leave Yelp reviews unless they are extremely angry and dissatisfied, or unless they are extremely happy and pleased and want to support that business. And I found 5 stars across the board for her. So I made an appointment. I was not disappointed. Mia is extremely intuitive, really validated that I was on the right path, and just found her to be so warm and lovely. So with that, here's Mia Simone.
Good evening, Shannon. Thank you so much for inviting me to be interviewed. I really appreciate that. It's been a long time since I've done anything like this, and it's been a long year.
Sure has.
It sure has, yeah. But thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful.
Oh my gosh, me too. Thank you for your time and energy. Well, I'm going to start with a question. I'd love to know about who you are, where you come from, whatever you're comfortable sharing in terms of what your spiritual or what your path to intuitive, to becoming an intuitive reader has been for you.
Okay. Um, well, the first thing is that I discovered the path is not somewhere out there, it's within us. Sometimes that's the good news, and sometimes that's the bad news.
Yeah.
So I just keep going, within. I grew up in a small, dilapidated lumber town in Oregon. And of course, it was a time when there were really no internet stations or any place you could go to except a library. And I was always fascinated, though, with just things that I saw on television, although I felt that they misrepresented, I didn't learn this till later. I felt that I had psychic feelings, but I would see people on television and I thought, if I can't blow up a car that I pointed at, or move something with my mind, that I was a complete fake and a sham. And there was a woman across the street from me who she was a kind of a deeply into the Bible and deeply religious, and she would always tell me that I was possessed. I would tell people just things that no one could have known. And so for many years, I kind of just let it go and didn't really think about it and didn't develop much. And then I worked in corporate America for too long. And I started getting interested in all things energetic. And I started to work with my intuition again, and really started to take off quickly. I took a lot of classes and probably did hundreds of free readings before asking for payment. I didn't want to just hang out my shingle and say that I was an expert. I really felt that you have to be incredibly present with each individual. And also I wanted to learn how to interact with people appropriately so that I could stay in a state of neutrality and not go into judgment or, ever get upset with a client, because I know anytime anyone's calling me that they're in a vulnerable state to begin with. So I never get those calls of, hey, everything's great. And, I'm just calling to say hello.
Right.
So it's been kind of interesting. When I first opened up my practice, I started with just basic mediumship and psychic readings. And it's what I'd kind of always had, where I walked in and someone would just tell me a lot of things without really going into what do I do about it, or are there any strategies, or and I think that I felt like I got caught up if they were accurate, kind of in, oh, wow, they knew that I had a pink car, something along those lines. And so I didn't really think too much beyond that while I was in the reading. And I really got to thinking, like, sometimes people would say, well, I have this situation, and what do I do about it? So I started to study energy more and more and delve into physics. And of course, physics is extremely complicated. However, I feel everyone's really capable of understanding, like, concepts, certain
Mhm.
concepts, like the uncertainty principle and things like that, where, it's really impossible to tell the momentum and location of a molecule at the same time, because either one is moving, or you're where you're at stable, and it's impossible to, then tell where you're going, right? So I
Mhm.
started to learn a lot of things like that, and predicting the future, and found out that time doesn't exist. And so it's over the years become incredibly difficult just to predict the future. And I think primarily because we have so many choices available to us now. And I soon started to discover that perhaps in the old days, intuition really was just a survival skill that we're elaborating on now. And I think there were so few choices, hundreds of years ago, when people really relied more on gypsies or fortune tellers. And so, it was much easier to kind of create a trajectory into the future and understand, and so the more I started to delve into this, and then I started wanting to just help people, like, what do they do, and help them connect with their intuition, because I get so many calls about people saying, when is my person coming into my life? And they cannot answer questions about themselves. They don't know themselves. They don't know what they, value, what their ethical values are. And they are asking someone to love them in a way that they don't love themselves, or they're very critical. And so I started thinking about all these things, and, like, why don't people find love or get the things that they want? And I think nowadays it's kind of interesting. I feel that so much of life is just, we kind of have a sense of entitlement that we should just be happy, right? We don't think about working toward happiness, or, like, actually evaluating what our issues are and connecting deeply with ourselves, and then treating it like, I want to meet the right partner, and, I want to have just a few non-negotiables in hand. I am not fond of the law of attraction, because I think that, just having a few non-negotiables in general about our career or love, or, it kind of helps us to make decisions easily, and just to be able to move on if something isn't right for us. Um,
Right.
so I started to just learn basic principles like that, and really wanting to direct people and what they could do energy work wise. And we were talking earlier a little bit about Albert Einstein's spooky actions at a distance, where we get entanglements with people, and particularly if we've been intimate with them, that's the most powerful force in the universe, because it can create life. And, sometimes when we get those entanglements, it's really difficult, because the person could be on the other end of the earth, and, we can feel them. And so when I go into a reading and take all of these things into account, it can get quite complicated, just when looking at relationships and the dynamics of them. And but mostly I want to just empower people with information, because intuition isn't just some, feeling that happens because we're going to be in a car crash and, oh, I have a bad feeling or something. It's basically the energy, that we interact with. There's only two types of problems, either internal or external. And there's external energies that we interact with, and then our internal energies. And when people come into our energetic space, it, you know, affects us, or even spatial energies like a home or something like that. It can, have a certain effect, like on our mood or our decision making, all kinds of things. And so, one of the most important things I think that I've discovered also is just, how do you own and ground your space so that you know what is your information versus someone else? And also learning not to become overwhelmed with information. Because when people ask me, about intuition, and I tell them our hearts and minds emit electricity and it travels just like a cell signal. We're remote now, so we're pinging off of a satellite, and that energy travels, and it just becomes knowledge. It becomes a voice, a picture, and our bodies and our electromagnetic fields do the same thing. And I think that's also why it's so difficult to, build artificial intelligence, because it doesn't have a consciousness or an intuition. And I don't necessarily equate what I do with any type of spirituality. I know a lot of people call themselves spiritualists, or I do believe in a unified field of consciousness, or a higher being, because I feel, how could we have a consciousness? How could we be created from something that didn't have that consciousness, right? But I like to keep it just to the observation of the energy for me. Um, and just looking at basic patterns, and you can determine kind of what the energy is doing just from looking at the patterns that people emit. And they're extremely subtle. And we can also just, feel into the future, and using the same methods, if we know ourselves really well, and if we know how we respond to various energies coming into our space, and especially like what we value and what our hot buttons are and things like that, because that's what tends to throw us off course. And I
Mhm.
find most often, if somebody is, asking me a question, or they're in doubt, either they're picking up the doubt from someone else, which makes us really, really ineffective, or they're in doubt because it's not their truth. Because typically we don't have to ask, like, are we in love with this person, or does this job feel good? And it's I get that a lot too, of people just, is this the right career for me? And I think if we're not passionate about it, then it's just skills through repetition, and it's going to get old really fast. And to me, all of those things are based on intuition, because again, it's just a skill from the caveman day, a survival skill.
Mhm.
And now it has more to do with, when we think of survival, like socially, and how people view us, and finding our tribe, and right livelihood and things like that.
Right. That's beautifully said. And I think that if you're asking, is this the right career for me? If you're asking the question, you already know that you're asking it because some part of you isn't fully fulfilled. Because if you're fully fulfilled, you know you are, and you don't have to ask, is
Exactly.
this right for me? Because you know, you're what you're really looking for is for someone to say, to tell you what to do next, or how do I get out of this, or what's my next move. And it's so true too about the fact that we're all born with intuition. That's what the sixth sense is. So for people who say to me, oh, I don't believe in the spiritual stuff, I'll say, well, look at it from it doesn't have to be a spiritual perspective. You can look at it that before we had all this technology and all these safety measures, so 911 and all this media and access to everything and safety, we had to be on high alert all the time. That's what our sixth sense was. That's how a cat, I'm pointing to my cat as if that's why that guy knows when there's going to be an earthquake. That it's that your senses are heightened. And in this day and age, we're born into a world, we're born very sensitive and intuitive. but we're immediately put into these boxes of, okay, now it's time to go to school and you got to learn these certain things, and here's a computer. And I think we really shut that part of our brain down because we don't need it. We don't need to look out for a lion or a bear coming to eat us. So we kind of just, we don't have to have that part of our brain heightened. And I suspect through evolution, it's, we've become less and less attuned. So that's kind of always been my explanation. Um, and what are your thoughts on that? And also, when you do coach people to, I don't want to say develop their intuition, because it's hard. I feel that it's just sort of remembering it or getting back to it. What are your thoughts about
I
that?
like to use the word evolve.
Oh, I like.
Um, yeah, well, there's just so much information being thrown at us constantly. And, again, in the old days, we didn't have like all these frequencies and, from radios and cell phones and everything. And so we're just trying to process all that, and it can get really messy, right? And I think it's really sad because I think a lot of people have information, and they clearly understand it from an analytical standpoint, but integrating that on an emotional level, you know, that's the right side of our brain, and being able to feel that and then have empathy for, another individual. And it's interesting because I think that, to your point about kind of we just shut it down because we don't need it. Um, it, this last year did a lot of research on just, corporations and the CEOs and how they became so successful. And it was determined that most CEOs, they just like have no empathy, or such a small, like 3% out of 100, of their brain has empathy, or that they're actually sociopaths or psychopaths. That obviously not all
Mhm.
of the people that may have that label or whatever are not murderers or anything. But, because I just wondered, like, I feel like the corporations are just kind of taking us over little by little, and shrinking us, and into these little cubes. And we're like output machines basically, and we lose that passion.
Yeah.
So there's just like you know uh, a lot to try to think about when you're you know evolving your intuition. And mostly the first thing that is just keeping track of it, and then finding out like what our buttons are and how we respond to things. And a lot of it is keeping the information that we don't need or won't help us process, outside of our electromagnetic field, basically. And there's different various ways we can do that, because some people just get so overwhelmed with information. And I think it turns into like people call it ADD now, and there's all sorts of names, but our minds were not designed for all of these frequencies and things flying everywhere and all this information. And our brains were designed in the first 6 seconds really to be able to take in our environment and understand if it's a good environment or a poor environment. And when the information just keeps coming, it can be really hard to find like, where am I in all of this?
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I know that's, ever since I started meditating, I feel much more centered and grounded. And it's been a practice of having to train my brain to tune into itself, because there are so many distractions, especially when you live in a city like I do. I live in Los Angeles, and I know you do too, where there's just so much stimulation all the time. There's, even from iPhones, TV, billboards, there's always something on YouTube to watch. And it's so easy to traffic, all the stuff. And it's so easy to lose touch with who we really are at our center. So when you work with clients in a coaching capacity, what are some things that you highlight in terms of what's important for reawakening, or, as you said, evolving their intuition and their, I guess, I don't know what words you use, but sort of that sense of
Yeah, yeah.
self-intuitiveness?
Well, talking about taking on too much information, especially empaths, it starts to literally like disintegrate our primary pictures that we relate to, like our personality pictures about who we are. I found that happens to a lot of people where they don't know themselves because they're like empaths, and they basically call them psychic vampires, that kind of narcissistic, or and they put so much information. And I think that it's just so important to understand what our information is versus someone else, and actually who we're around. Because I find so many people nowadays, like they're having conversations with people in their head after they leave them, and you
Mhm.
know people are just constantly draining us of energy. I find most people, because they're just simply not aware that they are. Some it's intentional because it's some type of manipulation, or emotional blackmail. But most often people just don't know how to protect their own space, and like get our own information.
Yeah. And what are some ways that we can protect our own space in a world where there are people constantly wanting to cross your boundaries if you let them? There's there's a lot of and push their messages, and um, trap people honking at each other in traffic and fighting over politics. I mean, there's just always going to be some kind of conflict, and then again at work having to negotiate how to be diplomatic, and even friendships. It's just there's always it, for an empath, what are some ways that we can protect our energy field and stay grounded when there's all
Yeah.
that stuff going on?
It I know for myself, I kept going through so many friendships or relationships, and it was kind of like different people, but the same exact kind of set of personality, or, and intuition really tells us all of that, like what are our needs and who works for us, and who doesn't. And it just takes an awful lot of like keeping track of our intuitive feelings on a daily basis, and going and looking back at things, and understanding like it what personalities or energies can we identify that are more helpful for us than not. And like everything else, it takes commitment, and it's a process, but it's well worth it. And there's a lot of like Basic Psychic Development was written by John Friedlander, who is an attorney. And so he needed to learn how to own and ground his space. And he talks about just like energetic cords, going to the top of our aura and the bottom. And, then, putting a cord from our first chakra to the center of the planet, and then anchoring ourselves also to the ethereal energies, and kind of creating a balance. But it's really up to the individual. I tell people that you can learn all types of methods. There's all types of intuition. There's actually analytical intuition. One woman who was a professional juror picker didn't believe in any type of intuition, but she believed that every jury she chose, she was a pro, would you know um, vote in favor of the client she was working for. And she said it was just things that she had memorized from the person's mannerisms, and tonalities and things like that. So that actually is a valuable type of intuition for those who don't connect it to spirit, or but really it's we always know how our body's reacting to something, or those subtle thoughts. Like I find intuition doesn't just come out and make itself obvious always. It seems like it's very, very subtle. I know one thing for me that also I found in just being an empath is I would say and I'd be thinking things like that. And then last year I discovered that I wouldn't actually be thinking those things. It was the person who, I that I was with, and I started to understand that through tracking all of these incidences and going, aha. So, I'd be thinking, oh, I'm going to dump this person, and then I would get dumped. Or,
Oh,
so it's just really understanding how do we receive information and process it and interact. And it's actually really awesome, because then we can understand who works for us and who doesn't. And I found so many times I'd been influenced by other people or things, or that I had nothing to do with, or just because I was picking up the energy.
right. Yeah. And actually, that does lead me to another question I had, which is, when we worked together, you had mentioned today as well that you kind of started out doing mediumship. Now I know that you do more what we would call psychic work. This is a two-pronged question. One is, can you explain to those who don't know what the difference between being a psychic and a medium are? And I know that you don't call yourself a psychic, but the work you do is what most people would call psychic. You call yourself an intuitive, which is the same thing essentially. But can you tell us the difference between mediumship and psychic intuition?
Yeah, most mediums work primarily with contacting, people who have passed and they've gone on to another plane. And I find typically that's, someone wants to either just hear that their loved one's okay, or, sometimes just hearing something about them can make them, just feel comforted. And one of the reasons I didn't go toward mediumship is I found that I didn't feel I had a direct dial to the dead. Like many people say that they can contact anyone. And I found that from time to time, spirits would come in, but it was such a specific message. And it was infrequent for me. And I'm not actually quite clear if that is because my skill level is just perceiving a different frequency. But
Mhm.
I started going toward intuitive readings for life, because I found it so, like, intuition is everything. It's really self knowledge and understanding, our environment, so that we can, make the most of it, right? And live in our potential, not just some far off place, but each and every day. And, understand our decision making process. And like I was saying, who works for us personality wise, and what our buttons are. And also being able to love ourselves. You know so that just became an area of interest. I found that I connected to talking about problems, and, helping people understand how they can shift the energy and embrace themselves, get to know themselves, love themselves in a way that they wanted someone else to love them. And I'm really obsessed with like patterns, all kinds of patterns. And I don't know how to describe it when I'm doing readings. And it's not that I can't pick up any information without asking a question. I can. It does take me a little bit longer, but I find if I ask like the first name of someone who, of the client's partner or whatever, and I don't always read other people, for ethical
Mhm.
reasons. It's just kind of depends on the situation. But I just found that I could just tap into the pattern of energy there and the dynamics, or just, even if it was relating to a single person and their career. And so that's why I decided to go in that area. And also because I feel more connected to the science. There's so many, Dr. Larry Dossey, Dean Radin, Dr. Teresa Bullard, so many physicists and medical doctors now studying intuition, and, proving that we have chakras, and, that we have the ability to send and receive information. And things like that. We have machines now that one at MIT that can actually, you don't even have to be hooked up to anything. They can just read our heart and brain waves and create like a baseline for our emotions, and kind of say like, oh, you're depressed most of the time or happy, or, I think it's like 84% accurate now, and how they can gauge like kind of what our primary emotional makeup is just from reading those subtle signals. So that's what I'm really fascinated with, and
Wow.
making the best of our lives. And just, I feel there's nothing more powerful than knowing ourselves. And, you know, it just, because we can't change what we don't acknowledge, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
sometimes I'm reading a book and I'm like, I'm just reading it, to help me with my practice and understand and kind of, create different energetic models of people and things to help me with my readings. And then all of a sudden, I see myself in there and I'm like, oh my God, I did not need that right now.
Yeah. But that's
But
really, I love that approach though of, and I think it also helps because you almost have a greater reach in the sense that um, people can come to you even if they don't believe in quote unquote woo woo stuff. It's because it actually has some scientific basis, and that's, I was always an analytical, more I don't want to say scientific thinker. That's not true, but I was atheist slash agnostic until later in life because I was like, if I can't see it, I need to know how it works. I need to
yeah,
understand, all, like, if it's, I need to see it firsthand for me to believe it. And that's why I believe what I do now, because I finally got that evidence that I needed. I got enough evidence, but it's, I think that you can help so many people that way. And actually, I've been wanting to ask somebody this for a long time, and it sounds like you're pretty well read, no pressure. What do you know from what you've read about the chakra system? Because I do my chakra meditations and all of that, but every time I do it, I think to myself, how do we know what the chakras are and that they're a thing? And how did they, who decided that the heart regulated this thing, and this, and the sacral chakra is it, and the root chakra is something else? Who figured that out? How did they figure it out? And how do we know that they're there? How do we know that they're a real thing?
yeah. Well, it's interesting because most of those models came from, ancient yogis and, India and places like that, that was all, evolved around yoga and that heightened awareness. Um, and I think nowadays it's unfortunate. There's just so much information out there, and I find people just make things up as they go.
Mhm.
Most often, it's really difficult to find credible research. But how do we know? I know for me, it's been a long journey just seeking out credible sources like the Science and Non-Duality Conference, and you know. Um, People that are doing actual scientific experiments and able to, through like MRI type imaging and things like that, they can see the energy, right?
Mhm.
And actually they did discover that we have an aura. And the military, I think it was called the Stargate Project, I believe. This was years ago, but they put millions of dollars into studying our aura because it's going to be the next fingerprint. Because we each have a unique energy signature, right?
Mhm.
And they're saying maybe they can use that to determine if we actually have past lives, or things like that. um, but you just have to dig really deep and look for credible sources. That's why I love, like, for example, like I was saying, Teresa Bullard. She's been trained in just so many different conventional, traditional physics and quantum physics, and she cites real resources. And so you just look for professionals, and it is very difficult to understand. And I think that if we were to look at someone like that and how they image the chakra system and everything, they may come up with very different verbiage than we would seeing someone on the internet of, oh, this is the survival or center. And also there was Dr. Mona Lisa Schultz, who for 30 years. She's a medical doctor, an intuitive, and a PhD in psychology. And she put so much study into people with different kinds of illnesses and studying like their correlation to habits and the chakras and things like that. So a lot of this is just dedication, and people who, like Dr. Schultz, they're so dedicated and they share that knowledge with us. And it's such a beautiful gift that they studied all those years and put it into a book that we can read in a day or a couple days.
Mhm.
But yeah, other than that, you just kind of have to check your sources and it. I have a feeling that they're probably at one time, I think we're ancient aliens here or something that probably, came up with a whole a lot of the graphs we see today on the chakras or what have you. But yeah, unless they're a credible person really referencing it, then you actually don't know,
Right.
unfortunately.
That's what I always wondered. I thought, well, who discovered this back in the old days before they could do MRIs and see energy and that kind of thing? I just always wondered. I kind of, because I accept all the other things that I believe in, I said, well, I've said to myself, well, I don't really know, but I'm just going to accept that somebody knows what they're talking about. But it's nice to sort of look more into it, and hear. And I know that that's what you've discovered, and I'm not holding you to any kind of, thing,
Well,
but it's,
yeah, and oh, I'm sorry.
oh
Go.
no,
Okay, yeah, and if you think about it, these are really degenerate times, right? Because all this pollution and frequencies and just everything, our food's polluted, everything. And I think that 1,000 years ago, when these yogis created these, you know, imagine how clear their minds were. The food, the no pollution, and I'm sure that they could probably, even if there weren't ancient aliens, like create that because they could clearly see the energy, right?
Mhm.
So I do believe, and I think that if we wanted to look for any type of proof and how, like Ayurvedic things or acupuncture and the meridians and things like that, like they used this information to cure people. So there's a lot of credibility that way as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, I don't want to completely discredit any of like the
right.
Eastern medicines and stuff all came from that. So we know that we may not know what the mechanism is
Mhm.
and how it works, but just that it gets results, and that's what's important.
Exactly. Yeah. When you are doing a psychic reading, an intuitive reading, um, how do I know how you work? I've worked with you, and I know that you do what I do, which is you often close your eyes and sort of feel into it. How would you describe the way that you receive your information when you are doing a reading?
Well, I find I receive most of it literally, like I was saying earlier, and I can see patterns of energy and it becomes information to me. So most of mine is really literal information. Um, and um, I just feel like when I ask someone's first name or I ask you to say your name, I just feel into the frequencies and the vibration, and then everything just starts popping into my mind. And yeah, and by the way, I can't read everyone. There have been some people that I have not been able to read, and I just shut the reading down. And I, especially if I don't like someone, or I'm
Yeah.
like overly infatuated or something, that's a big no-no also, because it's not gonna, I just want to look at the phenomena. That's the tricky part, is being in that space of neutrality and letting the information come. And I find, particularly about the future, if I start to push a question, that it starts to kind of just collapse. It's like you just have to almost like just let the information come to you, and have the intention or the question, and then the energy starts coming in and it comes to
Yeah.
me.
Is it
So
more what we would call clairsentience? Is there some clairvoyance? Is it all of your senses, or is it just, when I say clairsentience, I mean you just know. It's just it's, you just know it, and as you're feeling into it, you can say, I feel that you're um, very creative, very passionate. I feel like you're going to do something of this nature. Do you also see with your mind's eye? Do you actually receive images as well?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I do. And it's different for everyone, which is why I personally only teach one-on-one intuitive classes, because I like to know, how do people receive their information and
Mhm.
process it? That's really important. Some people are visual, and some people do get it from the clairsentience, from different sources. Some people channel, so that's really important to know. And primarily, like I was saying, I just read the patterns that I see, kind of just like a mathematician putting together numbers, but I just put together the patterns. And I don't know how else to describe it. I've always been obsessed with patterns, and when I was a kid, people thought that's why they would say I was possessed, or because I could see patterns that no one else could see, you know.
Right.
And to me, I don't know how to describe it. I guess that's probably why I think of it as like a cell signal, because all of a sudden it just, that energy becomes information. Um, but sometimes I do see images, or I have a dream sometimes during the day, actually. Sometimes at night I have lucid dreams. But yeah, most often it's not symbolic for me, it's just really literal.
Yeah. What has been the most profound? I don't know what word I'm looking for. In all of your work, I should say, when you've been working with all these clients, is there one thing that stands out, or it could be more than that, that has sort of really profoundly impacted you, um, or that's caused you to see things in a whole new light, or an epiphany, or just something that's happened where you've been working with a client, and I know you can't reveal, personal things, but is there anything that or if it's just something you've learned by reading all of these people, that has sort of, where you've had sort of a eureka moment, or it's just been some really incredible progression of events that happened because of your connection with other people's energy? I don't know if it's not a clear question. I'm just sort of trying to, provoke a response of something that sort of profoundly affected you in this work.
Well, that happens every day.
Yeah,
I
I thought
think
you'd say.
it's interesting because we exist on so many different layers and levels, and kind of the new physics. They believe that there are alternate universes that we exist on, and different planes. And I just find it so fascinating. And I think the more I understand, or the more I think I know, the more I find that I don't really know anything.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know. As time goes on, I just develop more and more of a love for all things energy. And to me, it's like, I think we overlook those types of miracles, that like love and choice, and the ability to just go on the internet and gain all this knowledge, and like everything really, right? And I think also, probably the most stunning thing to me is just discovering, first of all, this last year, I spent nearly the entire year by myself, most of the time just with my little dog. And I was shocked to discover, once I started interacting with people, how much like it really has an affect on us, how much we take. It's the affect of transmission. That's a real book that was written by a woman who got interested in this and this phenomena. That's probably one of the most shocking things, is just like, wow, it either helps us, pick us up, or we're feeling depleted, or neutrality. But I just noticed it's like, it's just so obvious to me now. And also just how, when people call and they ask me questions, it's like as though they have nothing to do with their lives. What's going to happen to me? And I'm realizing more and more like I've been through so many different iterations in my life of like being a victim or victimizing myself or things like that. And I'm just realizing that the knowledge, just the sheer power that we have in our mind is just phenomenal. And, I think we don't use it. It's like right there and we don't utilize it. But I'm starting to understand if we know how to direct our energy and we know ourselves, we connect to ourselves, we love ourselves, that's the most powerful thing in the whole universe. I know is just self-knowledge and self-love. I don't think there's anything more powerful, as hokey as it sounds.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
That's
that and just also I think some experiences that I've had from
Mhm.
um, i- w- interacting with people who've crossed over. I
Right.
think that's the other thing that they've told me things that well, one I'll just go over this really quickly. One
Yeah.
incident I had, it was just really interesting because this client I had was a really high up executive. And, I think he'd had like one or two readings with me like the previous year. And I was sitting in my car in LA traffic, of course. And all of a sudden, I practically jumped through my sunroof because I heard, call him now, call him. And, I'm like, what? And I thought somebody was screaming at me, but I realized I had the radio on, the windows up. And, then this voice told me who to call. And he said, tell him, tell him that is his. I want him to have the money. And I'm just like, oh my God. And like, he would not stop screaming at me. And so I'm like trying to look up his number and the phone bounces out of my hand and I get a hold of him. I'm like, well, I just need to talk to him now. It's just a personal matter. It's really urgent. And, and I told him that I got this message and, this man was screaming at me. And I think it must have been, someone who passed, like a husband and he just burst out crying. And it turned out that through this long series of events that the inheritance that was going to be his, he got talked into giving it to the family. And the husband did not want the family to have it. And they guilted him into it. And, through a series of missteps, he received the check in his name and was going to have to give it to the family. And he was just going to the bank when that happened. So
Wow. Yeah,
yeah,
that was the
so
kind of profound kind of miracle story I think that I wanted to hear, but I know that it also it's just that's why I call this channel magic is real because it really gives you that idea that um, we take for granted all the magic that's out there and available to us. That really all of this is magic, everything that's happening, but also those moments where how would you know that? You would,
exactly,
and
yeah,
it's like if there's
yeah,
ever a doubt, not that you need to prove anything, but it's just if there's ever a doubt, those are the stories that kind of remind us that hey, there's something much bigger going on than
exactly.
just
And
what's happening here.
sometimes, that I just had to be really brave to, just start calling him because, he didn't, it had been like a year probably since he had a reading and I didn't really know this man. So, sometimes it's really difficult. And that's the kind of other tricky thing I find about readings is a lot of times, people will record it and they don't connect with the reading at all. But then a year later, they listen to it and it all makes sense.
Mhm.
Or they think that it's not connected to them. And later on, they find out. Like one time, I had given this man a series of readings, and he said, every other time you've been spot on, and this one just was off. But I thought I'd sit through it since I've been in to see you like 6 times, and you've always been accurate. And um, you know, later that night, he woke up in the middle of the night and he goes, "Oh my God!" And he never told me he had an identical twin, and uh, he said told me the story of what happened, and he started crying. He said it literally saved his life. That, when I woke up and it dawned on me, oh my God, that's what she's seeing. So
Right. And that's actually a challenge too in doing what you do. And I'm learning doing mediumship readings for other people where I'll think, oh, I've had these really great readings and I'm feeling confident. And then I have one where the person's just like, nope, nope, nope. And I start to get panicky and I start to doubt myself. And then I would say 4 out of 5 times, well, I've only really had three like that where I was like, I'm just not hitting it. And then, or maybe four of them. And then, but like 3 out of the 4, I'll say, reached out to me and said, I talked to my mom and I found out that what you said was true. I just wasn't aware of it. And actually, the first guest I had on this show ever, Susan Schuler, gave me a reading. And I remember sitting through it, not knowing her, going, oh, this isn't right. Oh no, what if I just wasted my money? Like, oh no. And then I started to kind of connect some dots. But as soon as I left that reading, I called my mom and my mom validated every single thing. It was all from my mother. It was
mm,
all things that my mother was experiencing that I didn't know about. And that and things that had happened before I was born that I was unaware of. Not family secrets, but stuff they wouldn't tell their kids. And my mom said she was right about every single thing, very specific. And so I think, that's always the challenge when you are reading people, to have the courage to just say it and just trust that, okay, they may not recognize the information, but I have to know that I'm saying it for a reason.
yeah.
um which
One thing I found, if someone is trying to test me, the reading doesn't go so well because
Right.
it has to be an exchange of information. And the other thing is, since you're an empath, it's really important to be in a space of neutrality, because I have a feeling with you, you're picking up on the other individual's doubt. And I do that a lot. And it's so hard for me sometimes to separate that. And it's always okay also, I feel, what I learned. And it's funny because sometimes we just don't think of things. And I remember I had a reading with Dr. Mona Lisa Schultz, and it was probably 10 years ago, and it's 500 for 50 minutes. And she gave me this blurb, and she said, if this doesn't, match for you, I'll hang up the phone now and refund your money. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. After that, I realized, like, if I don't feel comfortable proceeding with a reading for whatever reason, it's okay to shut it down and or just to say, I don't know the answer to that, or just shut it down. Um,
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
a sign of an ethical intuitive or medium, is one that's willing to be able to say, hey, you know it was kind of, I didn't hit my mark today, or I didn't receive the information for whatever reason, so here's your money back. And so that's just good ethics and integrity.
Oh, definitely. And vice versa. I always tell people, like, if something isn't making sense, or, you want to change the direction of the reading or anything, just let me know. Because if I'm just hearing no, 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 then,
Yeah.
then I don't want to continue, simply because even if I do have the information right, then they're paying for a service they're not getting. And,
Right.
for sometimes it's just not meant to be. So, but you start to build up confidence, and you start to learn more and more as you do more readings. And I found, just like thinking of asking any type of question, that's like the tricky part, and not being a lazy psychic. Like, if you're not getting information, to try different ways of different approaches, or, ask different questions. And yeah.
Right. And yeah, do you have tips for intuitives, either professional or just people that are wanting to tap into that more? How can we trust ourselves more, other than saying, I'm just going to trust myself? Do you have any ideas about that? I mean, what, without giving away all your teaching secrets, are
Well, yeah, if the pituitary gland is, the basically the third eye, and then there's the pineal gland, and it's kind of looks like a pine cone. And I forget, if one or both of those, they have like actually have like crystallized like material, and I think it's the pineal
I do
gland.
too. It is,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah, it's like interesting when you think about that. But, for example, if we're wanting to know something about the future, and if you think of just, pushing all of your energy up and then slightly forward, um, that's a really good way just to, or just go back to the center of your head, or, to run some like gold or blue energy or reground yourself and kind of reset the energy, then the information may come in differently.
That's
Um,
that's
yeah.
actually a simple and yet very great tip. And I find that sometimes I'll say, if I'm kind of feeling like I'm losing it, I might say, let me just go and try to remote view into your house. And some for some reason, that I've always had really good luck with being able to see down their hallway and into a room and who's in there and what's going on. And I think the reason that works is because I am sort of looking forward when I'm doing that. I'm looking into,
Mm,
and I think that might be what it is that I'm triggering that. I don't know some people say, is it pineal or is it pineal? How did you pronounce it again? I never know. I say,
pineal, yeah,
yeah,
or pineal. Yeah,
I don't know
I
ever
know
for
it's
sure.
it's one of those tomato
Oh
type
yeah, it
things,
is.
but
But
yeah,
that's actually
yeah,
great because I think actually that might be what I'm doing without realizing it. When
yeah.
I'm describing what's in someone's room and what's sitting on the counter, and I've been right. And I'm like, I don't, but I think that is because it's almost like those, I don't know if they still have them, but I know when I was in college, they would have those posters, those 3D posters, and they'd be like, if you focus on it, you can see. I could never see those things. Ever.
Oh, right, yeah,
They'd suddenly
yeah.
become 3D. You'd stare at it long enough, and it was supposed to pop out at you. Never could I ever. It just didn't work for me.
Oh,
But it's
interesting.
almost that of being able to look through, not just
Hmm.
look at, but look through.
Yeah. And and just remember, whether we know it or not, our electromagnetic field or aura, it's interacting with our environment and the people around it, right? Whether
Right.
we whether we know it or not. And it's there was one other thing that years ago I was going to Boston, and I always look just right here at people's auras anytime I'm getting on a plane, just to make sure they actually have one. Otherwise, I'm not getting on.
Mhm.
I learned that from Edgar Casey, who used to talk about getting in elevators. He had a fear of that. And so, he'd make sure that people had an aura. And so I was going to Boston, and the night before, I had a dream that there was a plane crash, and I got really scared. And then I thought, no, I looked into it. That's not my plane, and there's nothing I can do about this. And I was living in San Francisco, and so I get to the airport, and I noticed when I was getting on the plane, when I looked at everyone's auras, like, wow, it was so pulled in. Usually people's auras are just like all over the place. And I'm just looking at the aura. I'm not actually getting information, but I noticed like everyone was pulled in. And there was this woman who had a teenage autistic child. And she asked me if I could watch her for a little bit while she went and did something. And I started noticing even her aura was like pulled in. And so, we board the plane, and I noticed that everyone's auras, I was like right in the back, they were all cookie cutters. And I'm going, okay, we were going down the tarmac. I'm like, this plane is not taking off. And, I told that to my traveling partner, like, this plane is not taking off. And he's saying, but we're on the tarmac. I go, nope, not taking off. And next thing, they deplaned us. And it turned out that another plane had crashed on the tarmac that was next to us. So they had to shut the airport down. But what I realized was that was the first time I was stunned. I go, oh my God, none of those people I can imagine were professional intuitives, but
Mhm.
all of their auras were it was like everyone's aura was interacting with the future, right? And they were unaware of it. So whether or not we know it. And the other thing I realized, that when we talk about predicting the future, We may be able to see certain things in the future. You know, time doesn't really exist, but it's not actually predicting the future. And I also realized that at the airport that day, because when that plane crashed, I realized like that had, you know, the night I had that dream, that plane had come from Asia. It was like a 17-hour flight or something. And it was a mechanism in the tail that wasn't maintained properly or something. So it's a seed that is, you know, it's going to be either fed in some way, right, to increase its probability or potential. And you know, it went unchecked, so it kept building up until it became a high probability, and then the accident. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, and that was going to be my question. But I did have a related question to how was seeing auras something that came naturally to you, or did you have to learn how to do that? I still always think of it as when I try to do it, I always think of that 3D poster, and I'm like, is that how it works? And then the other day I was doing yoga and I suddenly saw my own aura for the first time ever. Um, but I didn't know how I did it. And I wondered, is that something that you learned how to do, or have you just been able to do it?
Well, I was far more intuitive as a child. And unfortunately, you know, through all the discouragement and thinking, you know, if somebody was psychic, they were just a freak. And,
Mhm.
you know, so it's something that I didn't start actually developing until I was in my 40s. And, you know, it just took a lot of practice. And one of the really easy ways that so many people are stunned by this, if you have someone stand on a white
Mhm.
background, and you know, you just look at this place right here and let your peripheral vision you know, take over, you can start to see that really easily. Yeah, there's a lot of different techniques like that that I teach, because and also just, you know, if you close your eyes and I just, sorry, I have to laugh because I've poked a few people in the eye, but you know, you go around them and you just keep feeling and feeling and feeling until suddenly you'll come like across like a feeling, and all of a sudden it's like I can feel their aura, you know, but it just takes focus, and it feels most of the time kind of like a billowy pillow or something. But it's really cool then when you're working with someone's aura and all of a sudden you feel it, and they can actually feel where, you know, they're like, oh my God, I feel it too, I feel where it's being pressed in. And so there's a lot of different techniques like that that I use just to you know, to train my mind. And anyone can do that,
Yeah.
these, you
You
know.
just have to know how to look, where to look, and how to do it
Yeah.
from us. I think it's not because it's not necessarily, it is with your naked eye, but I think we're not used to looking at people or things in that same way.
Yeah.
We're using a
And
different part of our soul or brain. I'm not sure, but yeah.
And I think the other thing, unfortunately, you know, when people teach classes, and sometimes people get stuck on there's only one right way to do it, or, you know, that's why you know, people that claim to know how everything works, or I just, to me, I feel like um, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I'm just open, and because I think that we can't get stuck in that, because maybe it's different for everyone. Maybe the way we experience life, it's different for everyone. The way we pass into heaven, or we become enlightened, or, you know, what have you. And so it's energy. We can do whatever resonates with us in terms of learning and methods and things like that. And it's important to find our own like energetic style in reading people.
Yeah, you did touch on this earlier, but I just sort of to round out the conversation, I just wanted to end with how can being more in touch with our intuition benefit us in our lives, help us find our peace with ourselves, but also help us thrive and exist in this world that can be very difficult. But how can we learn to be our best selves through cultivating our intuition?
Well, It's interesting. First of all, we have to decide that we're going to be our own best friend, right? And it's really just making a commitment to awareness, keeping a diary of anything we feel is intuitive, dreams or feelings or anything like that. And by the simple act of observation, we can start picking up information and seeing things. And through that, it helps us to know ourselves. And we can't change what we don't acknowledge. And that's the sad part, is so many people truly do not know how they get their buttons pressed or what their like emotional makeup or dynamics are. And I think that's one of the most important things, because then we can understand, okay, there's this issue. I can direct my energy around this and, like bypass it. Like there's just different ways to focus our energy and to use it. And because emotions are just energy, right?
Mhm.
And our personalities are energy, our brains, really, there's obviously the brain in our head, but like, where is our mind? Where are our memories? Like all of that is energy. And understanding that and then acknowledging it and changing it, and will help us improve ourselves. And if that makes sense.
Yeah. And is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to share with people? It could be something you're offering. It could be just words of wisdom, anything that you feel like sharing. It could be, and we're also going to have you um, say what your website link is, even though I'm going to link it below. Tell us where to find you. But if there's any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share, please have at it.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and it's a big question, so it literally could just be,
That's a really big question.
yeah,
Well, I can't stress enough just self knowledge and self love and having empathy for others. And it's okay to not be perfect. I'm probably the most flawed person I know. And it's okay to believe it. Like I definitely believe enlightenment, but I like to shop too now. So,
yeah,
there's like, we have to be where we're at with ourselves. And, all this like spiritual bypassing of, I'm just going to pray or this will be that okay. From it just, unfortunately, I think I found it's really ineffective. Like we really have to get down and do the work and the nitty gritty of, you know, understanding like the power dynamics between ourselves and the world that we live in. Um, because the more powerful we become and we can own and ground our space, the more impact, if the affective transmission, really is a thing, and Albert Einstein's spooky action at a distance, then we can influence people with love and our own knowledge. And I think that all of these things, in my opinion, are inextricably linked with science. So it transcends any type of philosophy or religious beliefs, because it's just energy, and it's beautiful. There's a creator, a universe, that created this. And I just feel that we've kind of lost touch with who we are, and like seeing others as they exist, and connecting with them and just being able to hold them in the space that they're at. And you know I think also that so many times, like we don't want to feel depressed or sad or what have you. We just want to be happy all the time, but we can't cut off part of ourself. Emotions are there for a reason. They tell us what's going on, what our needs are, and just to listen to those. It's okay to be angry sometimes or depressed, or it's just when we get stuck in those things that it's bad. But I believe all of this can be accomplished through intuition, which is just, how do we best live in our potential and know ourselves and understand who's going to serve us and what our needs are environmentally and personally.
I loved it. That was so well said. Thank you so much. Well, for anyone who would like to book a reading or an intuitive coaching session, where can they find you?
Well, my website is prescience.life.com, and that's just the word pre-science-life.com. And, prescience is the art of knowing events before they take place, and not because we're fortune tellers, but if we understand how to direct our energy and, dynamics between people, we pretty much with quite a bit of certainty can understand what's coming in our future, and we have more control over to shift and change the things that we don't like. We can never change everything, but we have more power over it than we do. So that's why I chose prescience. So presciencelife.com.
That I never thought about the fact that that word is pre and science together. Now I do. The more you know. Well, thank
Yeah,
you
that's why I
so
love
much
that
for that.
word.
I know, I love it too. Thank you so much for sharing all your insight, your experience, for being here, for your time and energy. It really means a lot. And I just really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's just, this is such a vast topic. It's so hard for me just to kind of narrow it down and stick to the talking points, because it's life, it's everything. And it brings so much love and passion to our lives, and just a deeper experience of ourselves, and a deeper experience of living and connecting with others. And there's nothing greater than feeling that sense of accomplishment, and being in our potential, and being passionate, and that sense of being in equality with others, and connecting on the same level. It's like the most beautiful thing ever. So thank you so much for having me. You have a beautiful heart, Shannon, and you just keep going with your newfound career. You're going to help so many people heal, and bring them hope. And I'm just really grateful that you're doing this also, and sharing yourself with the world.
Thank you so much. I can, thank you for all the same things. So, again, Mia Simone, find her at presciencelife.com. Did I get that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
Good night, Mia. We'll
Thank you.
speak soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.